I want to start with a picture of this is the second meeting of the League of Nations, the predecessor of the United Nations in 1920. And what do you see here on this table? I need to go fast. Dirk told me to go multiply 1.3. So you see a table. It's only white male, old guys, and only a little lot of them. Like these guys, they were actually deciding what would be the future of the world. They were actually inaugurating multilateralism, which is supposed to be how to solve the problems of the world beyond bilateral agreements between countries. And so this was a century ago. And now if you go fast forward, this is actually one of the, see, this is the Human Rights Council at the UN of Geneva. And what you can see here is actually, well, first, much more people. I think good news. Maybe you cannot see people from face, but you can see a lot of more diversity from color skin. You can see diversity in terms of gender. But I think, you know, also something you want to see, which is bound to the title of my talk, is about computational. Every one person in front of the, in this hemicycle actually is in front of a computer. So actually people actually in Geneva, they are wondering what computational diplomacy could be, but actually it's already there. You get people meeting at some places or some convening places for multilateralism. They're all in front of their computer. And when they're actually going to take position or express themselves, they're going to pull data from their computer, from data science, from whatever. And so I wanted to actually have a little discussion with you. I mean, it's not going to be that much interactive because I need to speed up. But the idea is actually to question what actually computational diplomacy can be in the 21st century. And of course, the title is a bit provocative. So of course, there's one view of computational diplomacy, which would be that actually the decision making is going to be improved by algorithm. Obviously, this is already the case. Like 99% of the decisions that people are going to take is really bound to data, is bound to software, is bound to, even if you use Excel spreadsheet, is sort of like computational in a way or another. So I would prefer, like I say, rather that this is maybe decision-making involving numerous stakeholders to address global security developments and challenges. So remember, you have all these people around an hemicycle. The question is actually, is having people around the table like this, is it the right format to actually get the problems of the world solved? And this is quite a striking perspective compared to what Shashid showed. It was like co-creation and so on. Do you think that in an hemicycle like this, you can actually solve problems? Now, this is an interesting question that we try to address in Geneva. So there's a guy who is actually the number 4 of the United Nations in Geneva, is the director of the UN Library, Francesco Pisano. And when he's one of the best person who knows most about the multilateralism, and we ask him about what should be the future of this multilateralism, is actually having asymptotically, possibly every citizen on Earth to be actually stakeholders. Thanks for the definition of stakeholder before, to be a stakeholder in the decisions and the global decisions for the big challenges. There's a podcast by Francesco Pisano. You can watch it later. Listen to it later, but I think this is the idea. And this topic is really getting hot because actually the United Nations, they see that actually their sense of purpose is getting to be, it's getting edgy. I mean, if they want to receive funding and support from states and for people, they really need to think about ways of engaging with their beneficiaries. But yet they have not been designed for that. They have been designed to have states talk to each other, not people to talk to each other. So it's a big change that is coming up in the United Nations. And actually, there's a special summit next year to actually rethink drastically the way the UN should work. It's called the Summit of the Future, like buzzwords. Anyway, I want to say also something cool about Geneva. Something happened 30 years ago in Geneva in 1989. Does someone knows about what happened in Geneva? Another miracle. Okay, for the sake of going fast, I will just spoil. World Wide Web was invented by a guy working at an international organization. His name is Tim Berners-Lee, and he invented the World Wide Web. And I think something was really special with that. A few years later, the CERN decided that against all odds, because 30% of the budget is covered by intellectual property and royalties from intellectual property, they decided to go open source. So it was actually a really, really bold move to actually put the World Wide Web open source. And I don't want to just describe what are the consequences of the World Wide Web. I think everyone can sort of figure out, or maybe not. I'm going to show this picture, which actually was the cover page of the book by Newman, Barabashi, and Watts for the old guys in complex systems on the structure and the dynamics of complex networks. I think it was published in, I don't know, 2005. It was one of the first books I read about complex systems. But this is interesting because it's actually the last known image of the World Wide Web. So actually in 2003, that was the last time we could have a picture of what the World Wide Web, then finished. It's impossible to actually figure out visually what the World Wide Web is. So you have like a universe that is just accelerating in its expansion. And this is like a very, very major achievement by humanity, actually, to have been able to build such a complex system that could be like the universe or maybe a galaxy. I mean, whatever. You know, we're just like thinking of something that is just going beyond what we can think of. And there's a mechanism that was actually documented by a professor at Harvard, Joachim Benkler. It's called peer production. And the idea is that actually because of this way of doing with the World Wide Web, with peer production, was actually a new way of doing things. And peer production and open collaboration, so I go a bit for history, was really about the hacker way, which was developed at MIT and Stanford and other places in the 60s and 70s, meeting actually some guys who were awarded a project by ARPANET, by DARPA at the time, to actually build the next next network. And these guys, they decided that they should just do a network without security. So you get a project that is awarded by the Department of Defense of the US, and they decide that no security is actually the way. And that was actually a design choice that actually made it possible for the internet to strive and to grow. And the World Wide Web is a byproduct of this. So I don't want to go through all these points, but the idea was really that you have this spirit of hackers to actually being critical, but still being enthusiastic and building things and trying and failing. And at the same time, they decided that actually network should be available for everyone in a very horizontal way. So this actually for Joachim Benkler is actually really about making things really more horizontal. So it's actually, for him, it was actually challenging contract theory that was established by Ronald Coase, which was that actually if you start contracting on a regular basis, you should have verticalization. But actually with peer production, you might not have in principle much verticalization. Of course, the world is not perfect. Even in open collaboration and peer production, you get some kind of verticalization. But in principle, it holds quite well. And the simple ingredients of peer production is really about task self-selection. It's the idea that anyone who feels he is or she is actually competent for performing a task should actually be able to do it freely and decide to do it. Again, this is not perfect. If you look at open source software, this is not necessarily always the case, but it still holds. And then peer review, I think we are all scientists in the room, we understand what it is. So I'm not going to go through Alice and Bob scheme, but you can understand it that Alice can do things, Bob is going to review and so on and so forth. And this is only for 2 people, and you can already see the really positive feedback loop that is going on. But if you have like 1,000 people in a project, this is just like scaling. So before there were some discussions about like, oh, we could scale engagement. Well, actually, open source software projects, they've done quite well at doing that. You have some projects that engage thousands of people, tens of thousands of people with quite success and with actually very little governance, which is quite striking in a way, with 2 simple ingredients. Of course, you can have decoration, and if the project gets to get more complex, you need to set up some institutions and collective action. But overall, this is quite a reliable mechanism. So this is just like featuring some old research of me, was actually doing some research on predictive bursts. Actually, when you have like peer production, you have a tendency to have like super linear predictive bursts of production, which actually creates super linear productivity. So again, for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into these passionating plots, but the whole idea is that actually the more contributors you have active at some time, in some time window, the even more activity you're going to generate. So there's really increase of productivity in a way or another. And again, I mean, for physicists, I think there are 2 mechanisms that can explain that. One is actually a pooling, large deviation mechanism. Actually, the more people you have in a pool, the more likely you are like going to have like some outstanding achievers, which is totally okay. Or you can also have some interaction mechanism, and probably both things are going together in a way or another. This is something we are currently investigating. And again, I'm going to also skip that, but the idea is actually we can sense the way it's going on. So if you look at GitHub and you try to find when actually some communities develop, and they have to develop in spiky ways. So you don't get like a sort of like a bureaucratic routine work, which is 8 hours per day. It's actually sometimes in time you get like big bursts, and we were trying to understand what actually was making this big burst. And I'm going to pick this one, and actually this is for Dirk. Actually, at some point we had organized a hackathon in San Francisco, and it was the first one we organized, actually, Dirk and I, and it influenced both of us. But actually, what we were really it struck us on mind that if you gather 80 people in a room in the proper setting for one day, the delivery is going to be amazing. So of course you can screw up, sometimes people are not showing up and so on, but in principle it's feasible. So the question is, how can we develop some kind of science of hackathons to really understand what we can do with that? And I'm going to go back, of course, to computational diplomacy down the road, because of course I need the closure to my talk. But the whole idea is actually, so Dirk was really, and Dirk's team very much impressed, inspired by hackathons, and also myself. When I came back from the Silicon Valley, I was at UC Berkeley, came back to Switzerland. Switzerland is all about secrecy, protecting your goods and so on. I saw like, what can we do in Switzerland that would come from from the inspiration and the culture of the Silicon Valley, but apply to Geneva, apply to Switzerland. So I created an association called Open Geneva, which is really about like promoting open source peer production, actually, and breaking silos and making people just having fun also in doing things, and creating playgrounds for people to experiment in a way that there would be no judgment and really much fun. And the state of Geneva had a bet on us, and they said, we want you to break silos across institutions so that people can, in an horizontal way, they can create together. So I think Nation was quite successful. We had more than 100 hackathons, more than 10,000 people engaged at the level of a city of 500,000 people. So this is quite okay in terms of engagement. But it was not only that. You see at the bottom, you say a very nice Chinese lady, and she saw that she was inspired, and actually it created a burst of activity also in Asia, starting at Tsinghua University in Beijing. Where they actually replicated, but Chinese scale, so much more than actually what we could achieve in Geneva, and just for one university. All what they do in China is just much bigger, whatever you think. And it was really funny. At Davos this year, I met with the new vice president of Tsinghua, and we had a discussion over coffee about hackathons, and he said, "Oh, I know very much about hackathons. I participated. I saw the guy I gave a talk or whatever as being the vice president of Tsinghua." I said, no, I participated as a participant with my students, and I loved it, and it was really cool. So actually, we have a very nice connection with the vice president of Tsinghua. Anyway, we also had money from the Swiss Development and Cooperation Agency to actually develop in Southeast Asia. And so we developed the brand Open Geneva, the international brand for the SDGs, Open Hack all over Asia and also in Geneva. So it's growing, like we get more and more over time. And because actually we don't try to impose, we don't have a franchise, we just have like, we want people to invent new ways of collaborating under our brand. And the more surprises, the more new designs we have about like, all hackathons and all co-creation can occur to fix SDGs, the sustainable development, the big challenges of the world, the better. And we get inspired, and then we can recycle and get other people to recycle. So just like some pictures, Laos prototyping solutions for disabilities, open source digital health in Bangkok, and Bali prototyping micro-governance for waste management. This is something that is very important for Bali to manage waste. And actually the hackathon ended up being presented at G20 Bali, because last year G20 was in Bali. So we learned a bit from hackathons, and I don't want to go for a long lecture, but there's a science of hackathons being developed at the moment. But what we really found is that actually from scientific research that we found that actually participants, they value a safe space where they can learn collectively from diverse perspectives. Diversity is very important. It brings actually the opportunity for having radical ideas to come up. If people have all the same mindset, how can they actually come up with new ideas? It's by the collision of ideas that actually you can make things new. And then you want to experiment with no judgment and unleash creativity. What we also found that is quite striking is that actually if you feature a problem with a higher purpose, the idea that actually people should come to a hackathon or whatever co-creation even in the spirit of actually fixing a big problem, this is actually going to increase engagement. And so this is the only graph I put is actually if you see on the bottom that the higher purpose, the more people perceive the higher purpose, the more they are going to spend time compared to what they plan to do. So we had a study with a pre-survey and a post-survey, super simple. And what we found is actually people at the pre-survey, before the hack, they say, I'm going to spend that many hours. And then after the hack, we asked them, how many hours did you actually spend? And it was actually increasing as a function of the purpose perceived. So we find that kind of a good measure of engagement. So what remains to be understood for hackathons and engagement? Obviously a lot, but there are a few directions that we can think of. And because we have a lot of scientists in the room here, maybe we can have a discussion over coffee. But I think one thing I wanted to say is that actually we really need to understand better how rapid collective exploration of large solution space can be used to actually explore radical and modular innovations. So this is something that we have identified as a big problem. Then collective decision making under uncertainty is super important. You have people you pull from diversity, but how do they actually at some point from the collision of their ideas, how do they coalesce in ways that actually they're going to integrate their knowledge in a way that makes sense and that is not trivial? And we don't really understand yet that. Cooperation and resilience, and also we believe that one thing that is going to come very quick is actually can we have mutually supportive collective intelligence and AI? How do both things work together? So Thomas Maillart at MIT is actually trying to get into that. This is not easy. We are going to try to do that with some kind of bootstrapping, simple experimentation during the hackathons to really build in AI actually as a companion for 5 minutes. I'm going to go faster than this. So I think it's good. And then I think the last thing which results more to management, I'm at a management school, higher purpose in organization. Now there's more and more evidence that actually the way organizations can be resilient is really because actually the members of these organizations, they understand the higher purpose of the organization. This makes actually the organization more adaptable and less fragile to actually changes of tactical changes in the organization. And we believe there's really something about like the purpose is something that really increases the tolerance of the people to change, which is actually super important when you are thinking of designing new solutions, searching a large solution space. This adaptability can actually be bought by higher purpose, probably. So I want to be a bit striking here. I think in the end, when we think of co-creation, we also think of like building communities. And I don't want to go and to spoil, but Jonathan Franzen a couple of years ago wrote a very nice essay on actually why communities matter. He said, anyway, we are screwed up with climate change, and we should actually resort to our fundamental values. And I really encourage you to read this essay. It's very provocative. But just I need to give you the job. The job is actually in the end, we are going to survive because we are going to care about the communities around ourselves, those that matter, and that we can actually create bonds that really matter on the long run. And I think the essay is super nice, talks about like migrations is actually should be seen as an opportunity through the building of communities. And then I want to say, actually, in the end, we do experimentation. We got lucky because I mean, what we've done has encountered some success, but we want now to make it actually more institutional. And I'm finishing. And the idea is that we actually build a partnership with UNITA, which is actually one of the largest learning community in the world. They have 1 million alumni working on studying SDGs related issues and so on and so forth. But at the moment, all these people, they are learning in a star way. They're learning in an individual way. Now, the big challenge is actually, how can we turn a portion of these 1 million people into learning communities that can really address problems locally or regionally. And this is one of the big challenges that now we want to turn. So we have the mechanism, we understand how to actually have a collective intelligence pop up, but now we want to scale it using actually the alumni network of UNITA. So I'm done with my talk. So just two more advertisement. It's no, actually it's not, because it was okay. I want to say that we are going to organize a hackathon special on multilateralism in November. So those who are interested, please come to me. And we also have a special one on sustainable finance and also non-usual finance in October. So please come to me if you are interested. The slide doesn't show. So yeah, that's it. I'm done.